Everyone, welcome to another episode of Targeted Impact, helping membership organizations thrive by Wild Apricot. Now, you're probably aware this is a bi-weekly show where we invite on an expert, thought leader, someone who just knows a ton about the membership space, and they answer your questions directly. My name's Andrew McQuaw. I'm the host here. I'm also the head of demand gen at Wild Apricot, and I get to interact with our guests on your behalf. And this week we have a really cool topic, something we have not really gone in depth on, but only touched upon over the previous 6 episodes. Today we're talking about branding, marketing, and of course communications, and how the intersection of those 3 things allows you to really scale up your nonprofit, association, or club. And I cannot think of a better person than our guest today, Katie Appold of Do More Good. Katie, let me officially welcome you to Targeted Impact.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Amazing. Okay, well, before we get to the audience's questions, Katie, let's just talk a little bit about you so everyone gets to know you just a touch. Now, you, as I said, you are the executive director at Do More Good, which is an organization dedicated to helping educate nonprofits on the power of branding and marketing, and that allows them to ultimately scale up their mission. Now, you work a lot in healthcare, affordable housing, and literacy programs, and you've had some incredible success in that space, helping some organizations grow upwards of 300% and winning one of the top grants in the entire nation. Actually, is it the toppest grant, the highest grant?
I think it would just be top, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Top
Yeah,
grant.
top is definitely the proper way of saying
I
it.
know marketing. I don't know grammar. That's not my not my
Fair
thing.
enough. You won the top grant when it comes to affordable housing, so that's pretty spectacular. And with results like that, it's no wonder that you've won a couple of awards, including Top Woman in Marketing by MiBiz. You were nominated multiple times for the Lakeshore Athena Award, and also were recognized as top 20 under 40 in the Tri-Cities in 2015. Somehow, despite all of this, you still find time to actually do volunteer work yourself. So if I get, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a volunteer with Imagination Station, you're a board member of Gracious Grounds, and you're also on the board of the Tri-Cities Family YMCA. Did I forget anything?
No, that I take part in a lot of civic and a lot of community groups. I find that that's the best way to learn. That's how we learn, just like this, talking to each other. So.
Amazing. Well, definitely with accolades like that, you're the perfect person to be here today. So before we go on, I just want to pass it over to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we get started? Things that they should know about you?
No, you did a great intro. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited to connect in any way with Wild Apricot. Do More Good is a Wild Apricot user, so when I'm talking about this, I'm coming from that experience, which should be noted.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even know that. So now I'm even more excited somehow. I don't know. Okay, thanks for sharing that one, Katie. Okay, what do we got? Jerry is curious about what percentage of one's budget should be put towards marketing. That's interesting.
We always say it depends on the where you're at, like the lifespan of the organization. For a newer organization, look at 15 to 25% realistically, because you have no objective other than to grow at that point. Now, as you get older and as you build a stronger brand that works on your behalf, you can rein that in. I don't think I'd ever go below 10%.
Okay, that sounds really fair. I guess one of the things that's really great about kind of marketing in the digital space is stuff that you had put out even 2-3 years ago continues to do work when it's really successful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Frank says his nonprofit is new and not known beyond its small Spanish language advocates. They believe that their message is used correctly and effectively communicates, we believe our message about correct usage for effective communication in healthcare, justice, transportation is powerful. We are about to launch a funding effort. Do you have any advice?
So you have a small team, you have a great message. I would think of that team as ambassadors, and I would equip them. And this kind of goes back to that board poll. You know, we think about why isn't our board out raising money on our behalf or marketing on our behalf? Well, have we equipped them? If I had a small team, I would provide them with the assets needed to, carry the message on social media, email their network, connect with, just like we just talked about, other like-minded organizations who are willing to help grow that audience. You can do a lot with a small number, but you need the tools. You need to have the graphics, the wording, the hashtags. I mean, it's all those details. I think we'd all be amazed what our boards and volunteers would do for us if we provided them with the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. If you make it easy for people, you're going to get a lot more for them, right?
Mhm.
I'm curious, when we talk about like that kind of package that they should put together. So you mentioned hashtags and some text. Anything else that really should go in there? What would be really helpful for groups to put together?
So I'm working on one right now. I
Awesome.
should flip my screen and show you. I'm working on a package for our speakers. We do an annual conference coming up in October. Do More Good annual conference. Check it out. But sorry, I had to plug it.
No
I'm putting
worries.
I'm putting together for them a link to everywhere our conference appears. So for an organization, this would be everywhere your organization has a presence: LinkedIn, Facebook, all those social platforms. Um, some lines, short lines of text. You know, we know the character limits for most social platforms. Right within those limits and provide that content. Suggested contact points, I'm making a list for them. Graphics based on the sizes needed for all those different platforms. Pretty much if you want it to go out, create the tool to do it. And I think this is an asset package that each organization should create kind of when they're starting out. It's a great brand asset to have, and it will serve you for years to come.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me. Another nice thing about it is if you have those kind of small asks, like here's
Mhm.
something that you can share on social media, here's something that you could, hand out to your neighbors if you're like, let's say a neighborhood organization. When you have a bigger ask, like, hey, we have a conference, can you attend or speak? It's a lot easier to get people to say yes once they've already said yes to something else, right?
Exactly, exactly.
All right, Shane is curious about what do most member-based organizations misunderstand about branding? Oh, that's a good one, Shane.
It's a very good question. I think I think the biggest thing they misunderstand is the potential. So with a
Okay.
membership organization, you are essentially maintaining an ambassadorship for your organization. Every member that is a part of what you're doing, again, we talked about that asset package. What are you doing to equip them to go out and be an ambassador for your cause? How are you equipping them to bring in more membership? I mean, with non-membership based nonprofits, it's a harder deal because their donors may be one time, their clients often aren't as engaged. Membership is saying, I identify with what you're doing enough that I'm going to become a part of it. Is all we need to do is make that ask and equip them to go out and be an advocate, an ambassador on behalf of our brand.
Okay. Um, Great answer. Thanks for that, Katie. Um, Next question. Um, okay, how do we attract sponsors during this time frame when we notice companies are holding back donations due to the current economic situation due to COVID?
We've gotten that question a lot.
I bet.
I would recommend, so thinking about events, because most of the time that's what we're asking for sponsorship for. So if you're converting to a virtual event, chances are your cost of production is going to go down. I would lower the sponsorship grid that you're using a little bit. It sends a message that we're in this with you. We're not, we're lowering the commitment level because we know businesses are struggling too. It'll open it up a wider base of interest. You may have more businesses that can afford to sponsor at the $500 or $1,000 level than you do at the $2,500 to $5,000 level. The wider you can open the base, the more interest you're going to get. Another thing is, what can you do to help that business through sponsorship? Most of the time, businesses sponsor with some interest in gaining access to the audience, or getting some sort of PR value for their support. So they're feeling the pinch. Nonprofits need to reciprocate a little bit and increase the value. You know, a smart business person right now would see that there is even more beauty in supporting a nonprofit. There is even more need for good news right now. So the more we equip them to be able to tell their story about working with our organization, the more interest there'll be and the more success post-event or post-sponsorship.
Yeah, so thinking through the lens of long term, when the purse strings are a little tight, maybe giving them a little bit of a longer window of value, maybe a good way of doing it. Sponsor us now, and we're going to do this other event, maybe smaller or something like that, 6 months out, and we'll get you then as well, right?
Sure, absolutely. Or look at multi-year contracts. So someone may only be able to afford 50% of what your normal sponsorship is this year because it's a rough year. But what if they're willing to maintain that through 2025? How much value would that bring to your organization? And what would that long-term relationship look like? Would it bring even more benefit 2-3 years down the road? There's a lot of creative ways to dice it up. I think the biggest advice, or the most important advice I can give, is to think about it from the business person's perspective and try to make it a win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are able to secure one of those multi-year contracts, there's definitely an opportunity, let's say, 6 months out, 9 months out, when things are hopefully a little better, to see if there's a way to even scale that up, right? If they're already a partner, making that scale
Great.
bigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Stacy has what I think is a really good question. How can her organization test their brand perception, Katie?
That is a great question, and timely, because we are actually working on a message testing workshop that's going to come out in probably the first part of next year. So message testing is what I would recommend. Going back to the question, the political question earlier, and again, I don't want to touch that, but think about politicians. Every word we hear from a politician has been vetted through a message testing firm and probably thousands of people. Now, I'm not saying we need to go that far, but we all have a pool of constituents, whether it's our current donors, volunteers, our team, our board, community members. Gather some stakeholders and come up with messaging propositions that you think would work, related to maybe how they want to be contacted, what they think you stand for, what words come to mind when they think of you. All of those things, and again, I can't wait for this training in January because this is a huge need for the sector, but you need to test it. We all have access to tools like SurveyMonkey and QuizPro, things we can use to easily analyze that data, and then we need to use it to tailor make our messages. Again, we want to go to where our audience is and we want to speak their language.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. In my career, every stop of the way, I was about to say 15 years now, and it's almost there. Market research has always been a huge passion of mine, and yes, you have to ask. You need to know. So thanks for that, Katie. Okay, moving forward, Denya would like to know, or her question is, our organization is a historical organization in a small town. How would you suggest we appeal to residents in neighboring towns? Well, that's kind of a neat one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one kind of outside the box idea right now, and you say historical organization, so I'm making a little bit of a judgment here, but I think in terms historical, you probably have an older donor base, older support base. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that. But one recommendation I would have is every door direct mail. So we are in a digital age. We are in a pandemic. Everybody is sending everything digitally. How many pieces of mail do you get in your mailbox each day? Probably not much. It's a great time to stand out if you can create an effective piece, especially when you're doing a territory like that, where you know the zip codes, you can easily target the addresses, and you're targeting an older demographic who may have a great appreciation for that sort of method.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely that would work so well with an older demographic. I think it would be also kind of a neat spin if you were almost targeting a younger demographic, because who sends mail anymore? Like,
I
what's
know,
this?
and there's something just human about really, I mean, I really appreciate getting a piece of mail. It's fun. It's like a little bit of Christmas every day.
Yeah, can you imagine? It doesn't happen very often, but thank you cards. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're an
yeah.
organization that says thank you cards, you're gonna have like 100% retention. That's just my, totally unscientific guess.
Well, it shows intention and it shows appreciation. Time equals appreciation. If I take the time to write you a card, you're on my mind, you're on my heart, you're valued. And I know every time we bring this up, somebody brings up the environmental implications of mail. There's great, Hallmark has a gorgeous line of recycled products. So there are workarounds.
Okay, thanks for that, Katie. I actually didn't encounter that one, but now I'm gonna be nervous every time I talk about cards.
Just have that ready. Recycled cards are available.
Recycle cards. Recycle cards. I'll remember. Um, okay, moving forward. Okay, Solomon says, we are a new nonprofit and want to engage more youth. What practical strategies can you give to help us grow that are sustainable? Okay, so we talked a little bit about Instagram and being on the same places as they are, but what else can maybe Solomon do?
Well, sustainable requires sustained action. So whatever you're doing, you need to use measurement. So if you're posting to Instagram and nothing is gaining traction, and then you post maybe a video or something that does, measure that or record that and then use it again. Create something similar. You're on to something. Sustained interaction requires sustained touch points. So I would suggest that whatever is working, make sure that you have a system in place to continue it, to continue engaging, and don't only rely on social media. Make sure it's multi-channel and make sure there's some personal touch points, at least as personal as we can be during a pandemic, be it the written cards, the phone calls. You know, we can still make phone calls. People don't think we can, but we can. You know, those have great value and may create a deeper impression that is creates a more sustaining relationship.
Yeah, and if you're an organization, think about the value you are bringing to a younger organization or younger members of your organization, right? The same activities, I mean, it's a little tough to hold in-person stuff right now, but the same things that work for your older demographic are not going to work for your younger. So get to the drawing board, figure something out. Um, I'm trying to think of something that would be really good, but everyone's on Zoom, so I can't give a Zoom example. But there's something out there, I promise, Solomon. So hit me up via Wild Apricot email, amaqua@personifycorp.com, and hopefully I'll have something for you in the future, or check out the blog post coming up and we'll make sure we get something in there too. Okay, moving forward. Oh, a lot of questions came in while we were talking, so we must have touched a point there, Katie, that people want to talk about. Jordan is curious about what are the fundamental components I need for a successful brand? Ooh, good one, Jordan.
That is a good one. So we've kind of hit on it, but consistency is key. So, and this is my pet peeve. If you have a brand identity, which is your logo, your color scheme, your font, all of those elements, make sure that you're continuing them throughout your organization. Make sure your team has access to all of those assets. Make sure simple things like your email address, your email signature. Your email signature nowadays is your business card. So it should be well branded and it should prepare people to connect with you. It should also be the same formatted the same throughout your team. It's little touch points like that, but beyond the visual, it's the message. So how do you refer to your organization? We used to call it an elevator speech, but really nowadays it's 10 seconds. Within one sentence, how do you say who you are, why you do what you do? make sure that's uniform across your organization. I would say the messaging, the brand identity, and consistency are the bedrocks of creating a strong brand.
Yeah, and kind of just jumping off that one, Katie, it's also just what people expect, right, from your organization. If you were pre-COVID an organization that was like regularly in touch, sending out, like let's say a door-to-door newsletter, and you don't have a digital newsletter, you better make sure you have that in place. People are going to expect that from you. You got to keep delivering exactly the way people know you for, because if you change, then their perception of you changes as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Alrighty. Trina would like to know, could you suggest some marketing tips for engaging a more diverse audience? So diversity means a lot of things, but let's broaden it. Let's go with the broadest option. Just like the spectrum that is as beautiful as our country, with people from all over the place who came here.
Absolutely. So again, and this is like the theme of today's talk, but go where your audience is. So if you are in a non-diverse community, which they are everywhere, I happen to be in one in West Michigan, be intentional. Go outside your normal comfort zones and make connections. I had a speaker that we use for Do More Good. She suggested the other day to go through LinkedIn. If you are looking intentionally to make new connections, go through who you have on LinkedIn and who they're connected to, and just make introductions. It's gonna, in that case, take a personal relationship to introduce to your organization, and to build a bigger network, a more diverse network for yourself. I wouldn't be overt in that, I'm reaching out to you because I want to have a more diverse network, but be intentional. I'm reaching out to talk about my organization, plus I have interest in what you're doing. Let's connect. It's not easy. I mean, it takes stepping out, but it's not hard either. It's something we all can and should do.
Yeah, I'm into that, Katie. So thanks for that answer. This is an interesting one. Kabir says they're a little bit worried or would like to know about how to balance branding and possible cases of litigation by Consumer Protection Agency. Specifically, the concern is that organizations try and stand out. They make some pretty bold claims, and then potentially they don't meet consumer expectations and could face legal action. First off, is that something you've ever seen in all your years in this space?
No, you know, no, I haven't. I guess there is some risk if you are a service providing organization and you do not fulfill your services as stated. There's probably legal risk in there. Anytime there's a contract, and contracts don't have to be on paper, there is risk. I will tell you the big thing that I see on the legal side, tied to branding, is that organizations don't trademark their name or their logo. And for organizations, if you're going to go outside a small community, if you're statewide, regional wide, national, there is money involved. I'm not going to lie, it's not cheap. Trademark your name and your logo. There's nothing worse than getting established as an entity with a reputation and an identity, and then to have something else creep up that is maybe contradictory or competitive, and you have no case because you never filed. So that is the one legal thing I've ran into. So just fair warning.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. I mean, can you imagine if the World Wildlife Federation was, hadn't trademarked, and then the wrestling guys actually got to keep WWF?
Yes,
Be horrible.
that's a great example. A great example.
Yeah, it's definitely the one that stood out the most to me when I was a 15-year-old. So,
Sure. I'll give you an example for Do More Good.
okay.
So that we've trademarked Do More Good. The Salvation Army has a tagline, doing the most good. They originally wanted Do More Good, and we're going to use it. And we actually had to go to them and say, no. we own the trademark for that. The founder of Do More Good said that. But that just goes to show, if you want to have a big presence, you need to invest in it up front to protect it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Nothing worse than putting all that effort and then someone kind of swooping in.
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully that helped. Okay, this is a little interesting, and I'm gonna guess this is gonna be it depends, but or maybe we can workshop the question. Kika, sorry, would like to have some tips on making her brand, which is a nonprofit, stand out from the crowd. So maybe big picture, what are maybe things that help you stand out that people don't do enough of right now?
Sure. So what the founder of Do More Good has this line that he uses all the time, Bill McKendry. He says, zig when everyone else is zagging. So if you want to stand out, we all see the color schemes that are prevalent. We all see the typefaces or type styles that are used. I mean, simple changes when everybody's going lowercase and teal, maybe you go a totally different direction. Definitely keep that in mind when you're trying to differentiate from a competitor too. I would say that really making your brand unique, though, is going to be more about your messaging than your brand identity, the logo, those pieces. Think about when people choose to interact with a brand, be it through support, volunteering, donating. They don't do it based on the logo. They may recognize where to based on the logo, but it's really the messaging. So make sure your messaging is unique, that it's true to you, that it's true to your brand promise. And then keep an eye on what others are doing and zig when they're zagging.
Yeah, and circling back, make sure you test it.
Yes, make sure you test.
Okay, we are just past a quarter to the hour, so we're gonna have time for a few more questions, but then we're gonna have to wrap it up. Just letting everyone know, so if you have a question, make sure you get it in. Justin has a question. So we touched on earlier about marketing budget as a percentage. Justin's curious about if you're going through a rebrand, how much should you kind of store away for that? Because I guess that would be over your usual marketing budget, right?
It would. I'm relieved to hear somebody say store away for that, because I'm always shocked. A lot of organizations come up to it and they're surprised that there's expense involved. That's an it depends question, because a lot of organizations, you may have relationships that can create some of the work needed to do that. If you're working with an agency, I would say a very broad range is between $20,000 and $50,000. That's for new creative assets, new brand assets, new messaging. But think bigger than that. When you rebrand, there's always this temptation to use your notepads and your t-shirts and your pens from the old brand. And as strongly as I can, I would advise you to pick a cutoff date and dump it. And then make sure you're accounting for the expense to equip your organization to bring out your new brand. Don't try to mix. It creates confusion with your audience. It doesn't create the kind of loyalty you want from your team, from your supporters. So pick a drop date for the switch, and then just make sure that you've thought of every touch point your brand has, and you've covered equipping for that, be it t-shirts, digital expression, your mail, all of that.
Yeah, I would just add to that when you're making a rebrand, like that is a massive undertaking. You can't do a rebrand in a weekend. And so if you're putting all that effort in, definitely make sure that you're making it as most effective as possible, which means that hard cutoff date, like you said, Katie.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll get maybe one or two more questions and then we're gonna have to wrap up. So Cheyenne has a question harkening back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier when we were talking about being very consistent. And her concern is there an issue with consistency and then overuse? And how do you balance those two issues?
So I think there's always we are faced with our message and our brand day in, day out, multiple interactions. Again, I would fall back to testing, because when you become irritated with something, chances are your audience isn't there yet. They're not interacting with your brand the way you are. It's always more intense from the inside. So talk to your audience. Are you sending email too much? Are they finding the social posts annoying? And you can gauge some of that without even asking by just looking at your insights. I would lean away from the fear of overdoing it, and don't make massive adjustments unless you have research to justify it.
Okay, that seems good to me. Definitely think everything through and test, test, test is never a bad way of doing it. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question, and this is a really interesting one and kind of a big one. Dennis would like to know, market for membership or market for donations?
That's totally an it depends question. I hate to say that, but how is your organization funded? Are you 80% earned revenue through membership and 20% donation, or is it a flip? That needs to determine where you place your emphasis. The reality is you always need to be marketing for both. And if you have a strong brand identity, anytime you put something out, you should be drawing both in. But, as far as like where you put your ad dollars, I would really need to know the breakdown of your support to make a recommendation about that.
I think that's totally fair. So you know what? I think, Katie, can we do one more?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So this is a bit of an interesting one. Okay, so interesting. So Cheyenne is going to get our last question, and she says that if you're dealing with a small office and you have coworkers and leadership, and maybe not everyone really cares too much about branding, how do you manage that relationship? How do you kind of get people convinced about the idea that branding is really important and that consistency is important?
Oh, my answer is not going to be popular. So even your team is part of your brand. Who you hire to represent your organization is making up your brand. So if people cannot get on board with putting out the messaging and the image and the creating the perception that will grow your organization, I'd have some hard conversations. You need to build a team that will grow your nonprofit. And that takes strategy, and it takes smart hiring decisions and good onboarding and training.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned onboarding there, Katie. I was going to say, from day one, make sure people understand what the brand is and why it's important. And if that someone is maybe higher up in the seniority, maybe show them and prove to them why brand is important. You can always send them to a recording of this webinar, but or you can maybe just do some emails. You can show them how when you use your branding properly, you get higher open rates or more donations if that's what you're asking for. Or maybe you just get some really nice feedback if you're doing some some brand testing and you ask people and say, oh, I think that's really great. I like how consistent it is, or anything like that. That would be my advice there. Katie, any other thoughts on communicating to leadership?
My only other thought is, again, give them that toolkit, make it easy. Make sure that your brand is communicated throughout your organization, and that tools are provided so that people can easily express it. Don't make them go, upload a new file every time or have to go search for things. It needs to be accessible to be adopted.
Yeah, super point. So whether it's your PowerPoint, your letterhead, just make sure people have that, and you'll be at least in a much better position. All right, with that, Katie, we are now 5 minutes to the hour, so we're going to wrap up. I just want to say, of course, right off the bat, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful, so informative. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to make sure I tell everyone, so Andrew is going to be joining us for a Do More Good ideation session about marketing for membership coming up on August 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Head over to domorgood.org/ideation and sign up, because we will have an even deeper conversation about the topic.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be awesome, Katie. Anything else you want to just give a quick shout out to? Floor is yours.
Keep in mind the Do More Good nonprofit conference is coming up on October 1st. It's a live stream. We have speakers coming from Facebook, the White House, Compassion International. It's going to be a full day of helping nonprofits craft their marketing, their messaging, and their brand to do more good.
That's amazing. Wow, Facebook and the White House. Yikes.
I know.
Okay. That's some tough competition. Okay. With that, okay. So thank you, Katie. Thank you, audience. Of course, this has been wonderful. These chats are only as powerful as they are because of the great questions you asked. So I just want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to let everyone know we will be back on August 27th. So the day before your webinar, Katie. So we're not in competition because we would lose. You got the White House. We're the day before. We're the warm up. We're the appetizer before the Do More Good conference.
There you go.
Or sorry, not the conference. The chat we're
The
going to have.
ideation.
My apologies. The ideation. Perfect. So August 27th is going to be with Robbie Kemen Baxter, so the author of The Forever Transaction. So bringing a different spin to the world of membership-based organizations, how you can create a subscription model to continually generate revenue from your members. With that, we are all done for today. I just want to thank everyone again. So that's another thank you. And a big shout out, we have a virtual events research report that just dropped this week. Already over 1,000 people have downloaded it. It is really thick. It is over 50 pages of insights and data from over 1,000 organizations who filled out our survey. So if you haven't checked that out, just go to the Wild Apricot website. Really easy. All you need to do is go there, give us your name, your email. If you're already a member, we have it saved, and you'll have access to that report. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. All right. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
Bye.